So, just by way of introduction, I just want to say that Peter Coish is quite frankly incredibly gifted and talented animator. Um, as I mentioned in the previous episode with him on, it was one of those things where he was so kind to me and so nice from high school onward, and and looking back on it, it was one of those things where it was like, well, we need him a lot more than he needs us because we always knew. I mean, my feeling about it was that I always knew, right, he's gonna go places. He's just so nice and so talented that there's no way he's not gonna end up in the industry. So everybody, please welcome Peter Kosh back to the program. And thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
You certainly haven't lost your touch for flattery, Andrew. With so many kind words. Thank you.
That's how we get guests back on. Um, um,
Living proof.
there you go. First of all, Peter, tell us, if you want me to cut this out of the podcast, that's fine. A big life event has happened in your life. You got married.
Oh yeah.
I
Last
just want to
September I
say,
got married.
congratulations, and the lucky lady is lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you very much. We're very happy. It's been a blast. I couldn't be happier.
That's so good to hear. So for this episode, you wanted to cover Wallace and Gromit.
Oh, how could I not? Two classic characters with quite the library that they've built up now over the years.
Can you describe to us how Wallace and Gromit influenced you and just how you came about Wallace and Gromit?
Gosh, yeah, that's digging way back. I haven't given much thought to that. I just remember growing up as a kid watching them, sometimes around the holidays. I know that that's pretty popular for some people. Um, Going to see Curse of the Were-Rabbit in theaters. I don't remember if that was my first introduction to them. My first introduction to Aardman in general probably would have been Chicken Run, back when we were youngins. But yeah, as far as
We're
the
old men now.
inspiration, yeah, ex exactly.
Yeah.
And as far as how it's affected my career, I mean, yeah, it's I loved claymation as a child. I was never a pro at it, but had fun playing with it. And yeah, I think part of my high school graduate essay for college applications talked quite a bit about Nick Park. So we'll see how much of that sticks for the conversation to ensue. But yeah, they've been near and dear to me, those characters. I love them. Before I was really diving deep into animation, I loved character design in general. I'd say Gromit was a big influence for character design. We can definitely talk more about that later, but just with what he's able to express with such limited facial features is a feat of its own. Um, so it definitely weighed in on character design stuff. Um, in university, we had multiple projects where we had to reference different character or animators' styles, just to kind of get stuff down. I remember we had one for just hands. Just pick an animator of your choice and just see how they do hands. So that was very fun for like all the plasticine clay hand stuff with across Gromit and Wallace and all their characters in their fun world. But yeah, I think those would be the main influences that they've had. Just lots of study, um, and just inspiring to get the expressions, even where it may seem that they might be lacking.
The voice of Wallace, of course, is incredible, spot on. Um, but if you were to turn off the sound on the TV, you'd understand the story just fine, which is a feat of its own.
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of influence from Charlie Chaplin there, in terms of Gromit in particular,
Yes.
being kind of that straight arrow character. To bounce off of Wallace's eccentric nature. But yeah, definitely they don't need sound, and that probably lends to how timeless they are.
How
Especially
universal.
given like exactly, yeah, you can really it doesn't super matter the language when it comes to some stuff. So yeah, very universal indeed.
You mentioned earlier character design. talk about character design. Is it just like, okay, right, here's an appealing looking character or the correct looking character for this particular scenario, and it's also easy to animate and or economical to animate?
Hmm.
Is it that they're that it's it's impressive to the audience? What do you think?
You're starting to touch on a lot of the topics I wanted to go over there, which
Great,
is great.
great.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you want the right character for the role. It's really hard to know what that might be. Just from a baseline, the script will lend itself to that, of course, if it seems like they're going to be a more silly, more serious character. And there's a lot of different design principles that can go into the personality of a character. You know, if it's a more antagonistic force that's more brutal, you might use more sharp edges. Now, Wallace and Gromit isn't really known for super antagonizing characters, other than maybe one, but we could talk about him later. And so a lot of the characters are rather friendly and round, which was also another thing that I'd like to get in for a character discussion, just a limit of the medium. When it comes to like the clay, the plasticine, it lends itself very nice to those round shapes, which is perhaps maybe not the reason that they decided to make the characters friendly, but it is certainly an attribute that they work together to bring it even higher than it was as two singular things. Gromit, this dog, they didn't want to give him any lines. He's not one of the speaking animals of the cartoon world, and so why give him a mouth, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's one thing I guess from his character. But he does also need to be very expressive. You know, we need to know what he's thinking, how he's reacting to what Wallace is saying. So how they really achieve that is just simply with his brow. He's got the clay flab above the eyes, and it's a wonder how much they can do with just that. Just tilting it a little bit, just to make him inquisitive, questioning, straight up to make it frightened, which is maybe one of my faces that Gromit makes. And then not only the brow, but ears being another big thing with characters that can help show expression. And with Gromit's big floppy ears, like they very similarly help to really show what he's thinking and how he's feeling.
So when you're doing your animation, when you're working on just to go back in time, Baby Shark's Big Show, were you thinking about well gosh, I should really remember this is how the character expresses themselves visually? Or did that play into a fact any factor into it?
So not as much on Baby Shark's Big Show. I was a compositor, and so a little differently from animation, I'm not really getting the say of the facial features and stuff like that. In my role, I'd be receiving the animation basically already done for the most part, unless there were fixes. And I'm plussing that up with effects for highlights or whatnot. Different characters had different highlights. I don't know if that necessarily played into their emotional appearance, I guess, but if I were animating on the show, then yes, definitely. There are face sheets to show like different emotions, like oh, when they're scared, they look like this. When they're angry, they look like this. On kid shows, they really don't like to make the characters very angry.
Right.
They like to keep them friendly and happy. So that's stuff that would come up very rarely in that show in particular. But yeah, they're how a character emotes lends themselves to building the character themselves.
On Baby Shark's Big Show, you're more in charge of the lighting and how everything was brought together and the animation was already done, but that could also but that definitely influences the emotion of the scene, of course.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There's quite a bit more that I think compositors do that a lot of people don't realize, which admittedly is part of the job. You want it to feel natural, and if it's jumping out, then I don't think we did a good job of making it look natural. But stuff like for Baby Shark's Big Show, a lot of background effects, like the ripples at the top of the ocean or the light rays shining through all the caustics on the ground, just kind of helping bring the scene to life. Or, you know, if there are certain characters that glow or use magic in any sort of way, then kind of plussing up those effects and making them feel even more magical than they might already be from animation.
I mean honestly, I binge watched all the Wallace Gromit films, and so they're fresh in my mind in preparation for this podcast. Uh, if you'd like, we could go film by film because each of them have their own kind of personality. Each film has their own personality. What films did you watch? Rewatch?
Yeah, so I watched the newest one, Vengeance Most Foul, a few days ago. I didn't sit down and straight rewatch through any of the others going into this. They live pretty rent-free in my head. Um, but there was some behind the scenes stuff I watched up on to kind of buff up on some of that, some of those terms and stuff. But yeah, we can go through film by film if we want to do canonical order, stuff like that.
Just briefly, because I have a couple of points I want to hit. Going from Nick Park's A Grand Day Out,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
so and you can absolutely feel free to disagree with me. I feel like that's prototype for the Wallace and Gromit universe because you do
Mm,
have the slapstick, you do have the comedy, you do have the inventiveness of Wallace, you do have Gromit who is long suffering and just has to go along for the ride. But then you go to the wrong trousers, and it's like, oh my God, this is incredible, you know. And so
hmm.
it felt like version one of what Wallace and Gromit would end up being. Not to say that a Grand Day Out is not great, but the wrong trousers, my God.
Yeah, there's no denying there's such a jump in quality between the two, and there are quite a few reasons for that. Rather than calling it the prototype, I think it would be safer to call it just the bones. It's the skeleton, right? This is Grand Day Out was Nick Park's um, college film, if I'm not mistaken. So he wasn't working with a studio. It was all himself until the end when Aardman came in to help him out. But yeah, they saw potential in his idea. They liked his story, characters, and motivation, and they gave him the go ahead. So yeah, so for one guy on his own, you can definitely feel that it's more of a one man team thing there for the most part. Again, there was some help later on, but yeah, and just to quickly circle back on character design, like we talked about,
Please.
like this is the first iteration of these characters that we've seen. You know, he's playing around with it. He's getting comfortable with using the claymation models. He's learning over time what needs to be changed to make that easier, to bring the workflow and make that easier. And that's why Wallace has such a big visual difference between the first one, not from a lack of experience, but just from adapting to what would make things easier. I remember watching some stuff talk about how just his mouth alone, when he'd make Wallace talk in the first one, he was always widening out the cheeks and giving him the big teeth to really read the lip sync. And so, result of that, it just kind of stuck. And then his resting face became the kind of big cheek one that we know today. Whereas when we look at Grand Day Out, you just see the very narrow head.
Just to yes and what you're saying. Um yeah, that's also why Gromit's a dog.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because he was originally supposed to be a cat, but then Nick
Hmm.
Park was modeling it and he realized a dog was easier for him. So
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, with plasticine, there are certain limitations. I mean, both dogs and cats are hairy characters, but I think going dog for Gromit was the right call. Obviously, it paid off.
my favorite of all the films, which is The Wrong Trousers, personally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't want to waste too much of your time on each of the films, but I do have to mention the train chase.
Yes, definitely. One of the most iconic scenes in the franchise, I'd argue.
One of the most iconic scenes in comedy, I'd argue, you know,
Mm.
in
Mm-hmm.
animation and
Mm-hmm.
comedy. So can you imagine animating that?
Oh yeah, it definitely comes it left a lot of people scratching their heads when it came out, just at how it was put together. Now of course we have the benefit of knowing what went on behind the scenes. But yeah, something as simple as that, you really got to exaggerate the space. You know, we don't have to work within the limits of the established like living room slash floor plan, I guess, of the house. In order to make it feel like that big grand train chase, they're using these long, intricate hallways that are looping as well, so that they feel even longer than they do in real life on set. There's quite a few different ways to do that, and something that I've had a lot of experiences as well with the projects that I've worked on, which is simply where, I mean, you just got to make one end of the BG match the other, so that when the camera reaches the end of like the background, it just zips back over to here, and because screen left was the same as screen right, you're just moving the camera the same as you would, and boom, you've got a loop.
Yeah, that's the magic of filmmaking is that it looks like sometimes when I'm more of a live action person in terms of my experiences. I've done animations in quotes just for fun, but in terms of live action, I can relate to not improvising, excuse me. I can relate to jerry rigging things that'll look right on camera, but behind the scenes, it looks like, what do you do? So when
Yeah,
you
sure.
talk about looping around the set, it looks like, well, how's this going to work? So yeah, I can absolutely understand that. When you brought up Wallace and Gromit, when we were talking about potential films to cover, when you brought it up, I was like, oh yeah, that was huge when I was a kid. And now going back as an adult and watching the train sequence, it's kind of like, how do they do that? It's just having that experience in film and in trying to do animations, it's remarkable. So that was all I wanted to bring up there, unless you had another point.
One other thing I'll just mention before we
Please.
move off of Wrong Trousers, Feathers McGraw.
Yeah.
Another great example of character design. And again, just boiling it down to his simplicity. Again, he has his beak, but no real mouth, and not even whites to his eyes, just the pure black dots.
Yeah.
In the simplicity, he's still able to express so much and be able to be so menacing with such a blank expression. It's really a feat of the character design there.
You mentioned earlier we were talking a lot about character design. You mentioned a sharp-edged character. Um,
Sure.
was that Feathers McGraw? Am I missing?
No, so the one that I was referring to, I think I'm gonna blank on the name here actually. It might be Spike.
Oh,
It
oh, oh, a close shave.
Yes, the robot dog from A Close Shave, which I don't know if that one's plasticine or if that one's some other material that they made it out of. But again, while he's in the costume of the dog, much more friendly round. He's got the sharp teeth to kind of intimidate you a little bit, making use of that mouth to kind of strike a little bit fear. But when the robot's out, we've got the jagged edges everywhere, the cold metal, really making it feel like a fearsome force, design wise. Yeah, it definitely turns up the fear factor a little bit, especially for the younger audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh my God, you just reminded me. Absolutely. The fear fact the how yeah, the close shave was definitely more scary as a kid.
You've got to
Uh
be really careful when designing antagonists or monsters for a younger audience because something as simple as that, right? Where we might not think about, oh, that's a cool character design. Oh, they're all kind of maybe a little creepy robotic, but to a kid, that could be horrifying. Like, just to go kind of a little off topic here, like Monsters Inc. is another example, right? Like Randall, I love the character design so much, but even as a kid, like he spooked me.
yeah.
Mm.
And for me that was Finding Nemo, the equivalent,
Mm.
like the sharks. So
Hmm.
I'm right there with you. Vengeance Most Foul.
Hmm.
Let's get into
Yes.
that. That's
Definitely.
fresh in my mind. There are a couple points I want to hit on. Feathers McGraw returns. He strikes back.
Definitely. Yeah, he's here again. It's um how do I want to phrase this? It's fan service, but done in the best way, really.
A worthy follow-up.
I feel like a lot of studios, I won't name any in particular, but a lot of
Okay.
them are leaning very heavily into fan service these days. And I think a lot of people are kind of running on empty in terms of how amusing that is for them. But with something as charming as Wallace and Gromit, there's already not a ton of the media. There's, correct me if I'm wrong, like six films, maybe five or six films, excluding the shorts.
Excluding the cracking contraptions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So yeah, it is a nice way of bringing the fan service in for a beloved character that hasn't been seen in so many years, and just kind of bringing him back into the spotlight and giving us some more.
I agree with you. There is too much fan service nowadays, but because and I would argue that mainly it's because the stories need to be better and they need to be
Mm-hmm.
more compelling for certain unnamed studios.
Mm-hmm.
They need to focus more on the story and the characters and what do these characters go through, or what are their qualities that we need to to respect within the audience for the audience.
And that's a great point that you bring up, and that is honestly why Feathers McGraw coming back works so well. Because really, what you got to ask yourself is why? Why should we do this? And if the answer is for fan service, that's the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Obviously, if fans want something to come back, it's not wrong to do that. But like you mentioned, you want to respect it. And so one thing that I remember hearing about Vengeance Most Foul is he wasn't planned to return in this film originally. The inspiring seed, I guess, that kind of started the idea for this film was just the gnome bots. But they didn't really have a good reason to make them evil or, function on their own. And so they saw a spot for an antagonistic force, and what a better spot to bring him back for? Slot him in there, given what we know about him already. It builds off of that, and it keeps true to the original character and just gives him even more.
This might be the biggest question I've asked you thus far.
Mhm.
How does storyboarding influence the stories and the characters?
Oh, it's essentially all of it, I guess. Not all of it, of course, but I mean
Just
that is,
I
yeah.
I've storyboarded before, so I have somewhat of an idea. But just for the folks at home, how would you explain
Mhm.
it?
So storyboarding is where you take the script and you essentially divide it up into like the key points, the main parts, the tiny little chunks and chapters, and you almost illustrate it out like it's a comic book, just to kind of give you a sense of what characters are going to be in scene, where the camera might be, where do we need our establishing shots, and basically you're creating the movie or the short film in a very rough kind of semi-animated way with just sketches to kind of get the idea across.
It's different seeing a script versus seeing it visually. And
Hmm.
so from seeing it visually, you can come up with, oh, this character has this quality, or
Hmm.
the story, we can get an extra joke in there.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah. There's obviously a lot more that you can show with pictures than a script. Not to harp on scripts, they're the bones beneath the animatic. Or yeah, behind the storyboard animatic. Animatic just being another term for once that storyboard is cut together in a video form. But yeah, you get that's exactly where you'd be like, okay, well, when Wallace is saying this, we want him to be wide-eyed, shaking his fingers, he's scared, or the begrudging exclamation of whatever characters need to be angry at the time. That is where you get those expressions in on first pass.
I hope I'm not tipping on your toes, but I do have one more point I need to bring up, and then I'll give you a moment for free reign on this film because it is a really great film. The lighting. That's the number one thing I
Yes.
got from, like, I had watched Curse of the Were-Rabbit and I was like, it's a really fun, good, great movie. And then
Hmm.
jump from that feature to Vengeance Most Foul. It's in terms of the visual qualities, I love Curse of the Were-Rabbit, but night and day, you know?
Hmm. No, I 100% agree. And I already talked about doing lighting for my job, but I almost think that you'd know more about this lighting than I would, given your
No, no.
experience with more live action stuff.
Talk to my cinematographer.
Oh, no. Well, you gotta give yourself more credit. But no, definitely, it's night and day, like you said. Obviously they got the lighting directors on scene, and more specifically, like they'll pick out certain scenes and make sure the lighting tells a story of its own, right? Like when we see Feathers McGraw, we get the reflections off of his beak, we get the underlit to make him more menacing. Um, just simple stuff like that is not something that every film goer thinks about, but they still, their brain still puts together like hidden meaning almost. It's a second language that we don't even realize we speak.
There's a scene in Vengeance Most Foul where you think Feathers McGraw, he's reaching, like he has this contraption where
Hmm.
he's extending the gloved hand towards keys, and then he goes past the
Hmm.
keys because he's stuck in a jail, and his
Hmm.
hand goes past the keys that would potentially unlock his jail cell onto a computer to hack the computer
Hmm.
with that hand. And it's like, oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah,
That's
definitely. It's one of those things. I think I might have briefly talked about this last time we chatted, but when you're making animation in general, what a lot of people will ask you is why does it need to be animated? If you showed me the script for the pilot of The Office, right? And somebody's like, I have this great script for a show, for this animated show that I want to make, that you could read through it, and it's like, okay, well, this is great. This is an awesome script, but it doesn't need to be animated. There's nothing in here that's out of this world or there's no like comical punchlines that we can't just get in camera. And so if there's no reason for it, why not just film it? It's going to be a lot faster in terms of production time. It's going to be a little bit cheaper. Well, it depends. It really does depend on pricing, but the studios will lean to go live action if they can. And so with that scene in particular, right, like making the glove type on the keyboard with it when it's just like a little kind of scissor lift extension, is just a little kind of joke on its own that you wouldn't be able to achieve. Um, I was about to say in camera, but it is in camera. But you know what I mean, live action.
I hope this is not an insulting phrase. It's cartoon logic. It's like cartoon
Exactly,
humor.
not at
Yeah.
all. Yeah, and not at all insulting, I mean. But yeah, yeah, exactly. And the cartoon logic is what drives a lot of the comedy in a lot of animated films because it's so bizarre and otherworldly that, yeah, exactly. It's not something we're expecting to see because we wouldn't see it in the real world.
So talk a little more about Vengeance Most Foul. When so how recently have you seen that film?
I believe I watched it just last weekend. It might have been the day that it came out, if not the evening after. But yeah, no, I immediately loved it. I wouldn't say I went in with hesitation, but I think what I mean by that is that Wallace and Gromit has such a good track history that it's like, oh, well, you know, are they just doing this for the money? Are they just doing this because people want more? Like, is it going to live up? And I can, yeah, wholeheartedly say it did. I think it might even land up there as one of my new favorites, just because of how true it remained to the original characters. It just honestly felt like a natural extension to the world that we've been given thus far. And yeah, it hit all the buttons, it scratched all those itches of the visual comedy, the bringing back a fan favorite character in a really well thought out way, introducing some new characters that were quite fun as well. And just yeah, overall the visuals, whether it be the lighting, the sets, some of the props, yeah, and even calling back to that train scene that we talked about earlier with the tugboat scene at the end. Very nice juxtaposition there. Feels similar but different enough to be completely its own thing. And yeah, just a very fun watch in general. Yeah.
Just to circle back, we're also kind of uh I'll phrase it like this, pleasantly surprised when a sequel or bringing back a character is great.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this blew the expectations away.
Definitely, yeah. Obviously, when you're making a sequel, it's to capture the hype of the original, or at this point, I mean, this is only the second feature film, but so many shorts to precede it. Yeah, exactly. It's will this be as good as those? And if it's not, then yeah, we can leave feeling a little we can feel a little upset about that because it's like, oh, well, is this how they're going to be from now on? Like, do we even need another one at this point? And yeah, I think after watching the newest one, if they keep it up like that, then I'm going to keep watching them because, it's so beloved.
And let's talk about Aardman the studio for a moment.
Sure, yeah.
They did they with on top of Wallace and Gromit, they've done
Hmm.
Creature Comforts, they've done
Hmm.
Flushed Away, they've done Chicken Run,
Hmm.
and uh and the other one. Sorry,
On the sheep.
yes, Shaun the Sheep, which is a spin-off of Wallace and Gromit, of
Hmm.
course. The one I was
Hmm.
thinking of was Arthur Christmas.
Oh yes, Arthur Christmas. Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's not bad.
And yeah, I guess just to touch on a couple of the films that you mentioned, yeah, a lot of those were in partnership with DreamWorks back in the day when they wanted to collaborate. I think they originally had a plan to do 10 films, didn't quite get there because of creative differences, which I kind of understand. To talk a little bit more critically on Wallace and Gromit, I do think I can say that Curse of the Were-Rabbit is probably my least favorite. And that's not to say it's bad in any regard. It's just not my favorite compared to the others. And I do feel like a big reason for that did come from the creative differences that Aardman expressed while working with DreamWorks. They wanted to dial down the British humor. They wanted more jokes that the American audience would understand, and that is taking away something that is so core essential to these characters and these stories. And it's still a good movie, but when I want the frosting, I don't want like a slim layer. I want the full cupcake. And
Yes.
so when DreamWorks is slicing off the frosting, it's going to put it towards the bottom of the tier list. And so I'm glad that they cut it off, and decided to go on their own way, because almost right after Curse of the Were-Rabbit, we got A Matter of Loaf and Death, and
Yes.
that was right back to the original, and that's because they're not being limited by that other studio. Um, Currently, they've been working with Netflix a lot, which seems to be going well for them. So I'm glad that there's no interruptions or creative liberties being taken away from them with working with these bigger studios, because on their own it can be hard, especially with stop motion, getting the budgets for these pictures, especially if you have something that flops in theaters, like Early Man. It's hard to come back from those. And it's not just Aardman, it's other stop motion studios. Leica in particular also comes to mind, where, the budget is always something that very closely needs to be paid attention. I mean, with all studios, but more in particular with stop motion, it's an expensive medium.
Yeah.
You're not doing it for the cost, you're doing it for love of the craft. And so you need them to pay out. And so when you can have a supporter as big as Netflix and they're not treading on your toes, then that's a good partnership.
To talk about the the Britishness of it for just a moment.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I agree with you. It's very essential, the DNA of Wallace and Gromit, that it be British. And well, I'm personally not going to say Curse of the Were Rabbit's the weakest, but I will say that if they're feeling creatively, if they were to feel creatively stifled by that collaboration, I can see that. Yeah. I want to circle back to you, Peter Kosh, the man, for a moment.
Mhm.
How did you get into animation? I know I'm digressing us a little bit, but I want to hear about that.
Totally, yeah. A big part of it was freestyle, which we've talked about before. I don't know if you talked about it more than with just me on this podcast, but yeah, the school that we went to for film and stuff, and now they do animation.
That's right.
Not while we were there, but
Yeah,
it still got me there nevertheless. Back in the day, I was, as I've mentioned, very big into character design. I loved making all sorts of different characters and imagining the stories that they'd go through. And animation just kind of seemed like the next logical step. Like, I have all these characters that I love. I love to make characters. How would they interact? How can I bring them to life? And yeah, that's just the medium to do so.
And that's I well, I'm certainly glad that that freestyle did that for you because it seems like you were already heading to me it already seemed like you were heading there, and I'm glad
Hmm.
freestyle gave you that extra push.
Hmm. Well, definitely. I mean, yeah, just to touch on it real quickly, like I mentioned, if I hadn't done freestyle, I probably would have leaned more into strict character design and sticking there, making sure that my characters are, I guess, perfect in every way they could be. Not to say that I don't now, but being taking a film class and learning more about story structure and different kinds of shots really did make me feel like I could do something more with the characters, and tell stories with them and give them that life.
The ABCs of filmmaking.
Exactly, yeah.
To go back to Wallace and Gromit, this is a big question. How would you rank them in the pantheon of animation?
Ooh, oh gosh,
I know.
this is a tricky one. I mean they are my favorite stop motion movies.
Good.
Like I Love You, but Aardman I think just has a little bit more nostalgia to me. As far as stop motion goes, they're the bee's knees. In terms of animation in general, I mean, yeah, they're up there as one of my favorites. If I was offered to work at a dream studio, Aardman is right up there in top 10. Um, yeah, um, in terms of how they rank against everybody is a really hard question.
I think you answered the
Uh,
question. I think that's good.
okay. I think a lot of different studios have their gems. And in terms of films, and Aardman has a lot of gems. So we mentioned they've got a good track record. Whether or not that puts them above other studios is really hard to say because there are a lot of movies that I love equally for very different reasons. But yeah, they're up there as one of the tops, no doubt.
This is a total side tangent, and but I have to bring it up since we're talking about Aardman.
Mhm.
If I'm not mistaken, there was an animator named Richard Williams. Are you familiar?
Mm. Um,
He did the animation for Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He directed that.
oh, okay, okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, and if I'm wrong, I'm going to cut it out of the podcast because I always have to be right on my own show.
Hmm.
Um, if I'm not mistaken, they just hired Aardman hired him in the part of his career as an artist in residence, and
Okay, sure.
that's it, you know. And so
Yeah,
they just let him do his own thing, and
yeah, definitely.
so I'm just like that respect, you know. So
Yeah, I mean that's the ultimate goal, right? Just to be let free to do what you want and just let that creativity show. I mean, he's someone who's well deserving of it for sure.
what are the thoughts about Wallace and Gromit? Can you share with us?
Um, in terms of Vengeance Most Foul, I guess there's a lot of really fun stuff going on that we didn't see necessarily in the other shorts and films. Um, I will say the one thing in Vengeance Most Foul that kind of took me out of it was I think there is a couple of fully digital scenes where what they're doing is when they're going into the internet or like the gnome hacking. We do go into sort of a tunnel. I could be wrong on this. Maybe I didn't see anything about this behind the scenes. It felt very 3D digital animation. So maybe something a little bit more claymation for that would have been fantastic. But that was kind of the one thing that definitely jumped is like, oh, whoa, Wallace and Gromit is using like 3D now for transitions. Like that's interesting. Um, but in terms of other fun stuff, back to the tugboat race. You can see the behind the scenes where they're going through puppeting those. And one thing that this film gets a lot better than the others is water, if you ask me.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know whether or not it is something that they are animating in real life separately, or if it is computer animated. Nothing wrong if it is. It looks great. But yeah, when you see those sets with those tugboats, it is empty. There is no water in there. It is just the boats on the little arms that will hold up the props. And yeah, all of the water and stuff is added in post. So that would be a compositor's job. to add that water in there. So if I was working at Aardman, that's probably something that I would have been doing, among a lot of other things that they got compositors to do there.
Yeah, I watched a brief snippet of behind the scenes prep, and yeah, it seems like there were many more compositors on this film than there were in the
Mm,
previous films. For example, like just to go back to A Grand Day Out,
mm,
um, I mean, they were animating all of it in camera at the same time. And meanwhile, with this,
hmm
because of technology, the updates to technology, they
hmm
could animate multiple characters in multiple, like in one location, then another, and
hmm
combine it all together. So that was certainly interesting. I think lends itself to that world. I think.
Definitely. I think one of the biggest discussions in film in general is, when do we capture it in camera? When do we ship it to VFX? And every director will have their own opinion on that. And I don't think there is any wrong answer. But it does take a good director to know when something can be done, should we? And if something can't be done, how good will it look if we do need to make it VFX? And Wallace and Gromit, obviously, being a tactical medium, will try to get everything they can done in camera. But they still do use VFX tricks like you mentioned, where it's like, oh, we have Wallace, we'll just shoot him on his own on a green screen or something. And then like all this crowd of characters that we have, we can do them one by one now, and we can cut them all out and we can composite them into a scene all together. We don't need to make sure that every character is moving in the same room like we used to back in the day. And so taking advantage of simple stuff like that is what you see that, well, it's something that you don't see that makes it come out as a better product.
Talk a little bit more about well, talk a little bit about the difference between what you do and what Armin does. You know what I mean? Like I believe you work in a more 2D medium. I mean,
Mhm,
there's the 3D technology, there's of like 3D compositing if I'm not mistaken, versus
mhm,
but
mhm,
mainly 2D animation versus uh stop motion
mhm.
in for lack of a better term, the real world.
Sure, yeah. So keep in mind, I don't work with claymation.
I know.
It's been, well, not since I was very young.
Same here.
So
Same
I could
here.
be wrong, but from my 2D compositor perspective, a lot of the stuff that I'd imagine them doing is, like I mentioned, green screen cutouts, whether that's keying, which is basically just taking a color, removing it, rotoscoping, which is essentially tracing out a character to cut them out of whatever background they're on so that you can move them so that you have that alpha layer, the transparency to layer them on top of stuff. Um, the water is another good one that we talked about. We're comping that in, and that's not as much, not as well, I don't know, so I can't really say, but not as much work as you might think, where essentially the compositor is probably receiving the finished footage and probably receiving the finished water. And they're just making sure that those two elements work well together, whether that needs extra masking or extra particle systems for like the sea foam, something like that. And then the simplest one that yeah. And then the simplest one that I think any compositor does across all the mediums, 3D, claymation, 2D, even live action, is just screen replacement. Anytime you see a laptop, a phone, a TV in the corner, and it's got something moving on it, a compositor probably put that screen in there from a separate video file.
I need to ask this question because I want to leave no stone unturned. But I also don't want to take up any more of your time. Any more thoughts? Anything else you can share with us about Wallace and Gromit, from your
Oh,
perspective?
I love it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. I highly recommend the new one. And yeah, overall, it is like I mentioned, love of the craft. They love what they do and they pour their hearts and souls into it, and it really shows. And that's always something that is nice and charming to see, just how much work goes into something.
I have one final question for you. Is there anything you'd like to promote, and where can people follow you?
I guess people can follow me on my Instagram. I'm not as active these days as I used to be, but that's at Peter_Coifish. Other than that, I guess me and my buddies do some YouTube stuff every once in a while if you want to check us out on Zane Games. But yeah, that would be about it.
If you send me the link to Zen Games, I'll include that in the show notes and also include your Instagram in the show notes.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll do.
Peter Kosh, it really has been an honor and a pleasure having you on the show. I hope you'll come back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a blast as always, and always great to catch up and talk about some great films.
Okay. Peter had one final thought. Please share with us. I'm so excited.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if you remember from high school, but one thing that I always loved just as much as animation was Pokemon. And one thing that I cannot wait for, as long as it's gonna take, is that Aardman has partnered with Pokemon, and they announced that they're working on something with Pokemon right now. It's probably not coming out until like 2027 or 2028, which is has me really gritting my teeth because I can't wait to see what it'll be. But just two of my favorite franchises combined. Like, oh,
And you do a lot of Pokemon fan art. Am I
yeah.
mistaken? Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, on the Instagram, you'll see I do a lot of Fakemon, Pokemon artwork. And then even on the channel that I just mentioned, it's basically all like Pokemon games, little game shows and quizzes and whatnot. But yeah, so just to see the powerhouses combine is it's a dream come true. I can't wait to see what they come up with.
Well, Peter Kosh, thank you for promoting two powerhouses. No, no, that's so cool. By the way, can I just say, your Pokemon drawings are Pokemon character designs. I always think that's not real, because it's so good.
Oh, well, thank you very much. That would be another dream come true. Either Aardman or Pokemon. Yeah. Drop everything to work for either of them.